Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Ono no Komachi, our newest unit coming into us with the Valentine's event here on JP for 2025. Now, Komachi is an interesting unit. She's a limited AOE caster, but that isn't necessarily going to tell you the whole story of her. You see, Komachi is a just absolutely cracked unit when it comes to the overall capabilities of her kit. She is an AOE Quick Caster, which might strike you as a little bit odd at first, but trust me when I say this that they really gave her so much to really succeed when it comes to her entirety of her design. Again, if you look at another example of a really strong AOE caster, Daiko Kuten, aka the Rats, they, even though they're 4-star, are also a black grail looping kind of juggernaut for what they are. And so they're kind of a well-kept, like, secret at this point in the game. And Ono no Komachi is coming to us very much in the same design sort of mentality. And it's definitely going to be apparent as we get into her kit. So let's go ahead and let's start by talking to you about why you might want Komachi here by, again, starting with the stats. So right here off the bat, you guys can see she's got 11.4k attack. This is nothing too major. Again, we're pretty much used to at this point AoE casters not being, absolutely crazy when it comes to their damage output, but still she's going to be pretty solid for what she has in store. Her HP values are notably a little bit less, and this is probably one of her bigger concerns, especially as a 5-star. Only having 13k health is definitely a warning sign, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. As you guys can see, she is Sky Attribute here. She has 52-star Absorption and 10.8-star Generation. Her NP charge per attack is 0.8. This is actually relatively high. Again, she is a caster, but she's also a quick unit, and quick units tend to have a little bit higher NP gain modifiers compared to their arts compatriots, usually due to the fact that the quick card type doesn't generate as much charge overall whenever you're hitting enemies. Her NP charge defense, which is the amount that she gets whenever she gets hit, is the standard 3%. Her death rate, though, is something you need to watch out for in theory because it's 40.5. The reason I say in theory is because Komachi actually has a passive that makes her death immune. So this is a really weird stat for them to have jacked up, considering it just doesn't impact her at all. Her alignment is neutral and balanced, which is another relatively rare alignment. It means that you're not necessarily going to be able to gain the benefits of a lot of other things that might buff your alignment, but you're also not going to have to suffer, exploitations against your alignment from enemies that maybe would do more damage to you because of it. Neutral and balanced is just a relatively untouched sort of niche, and it is, as is, again, neutral and balanced. Her gender here is going to be female. She is divine, a group servant, a hominidae servant, a normal servant, a 7-night servant, and weak to enema elish. So a little bit of interesting stuff there. In stage 1, she is considered to be humanoid, and in stage 2, she is considered to be levitating. As of the recording of this video, we do not have stage 3 yet, so that will definitely be telling, but it is very likely that that is where the group servant aspect is going to come into play. Now, as we take a look, you guys can see her deck here is triple quick, single arts, and single buster. This is maybe a little bit of a concern in the fact that we are not double quick, double arts, but it's not too crazy in the sense that, again, this is a quick-centric unit. You're going to be wanting to use the Scotty variants alongside of her. So her having triple quick cards in her deck just means that she's going to have more cards that can pop off. Naturally, Summer Scotty is somebody that can buff Buster crit damage as opposed to quick crit damage. So this may be something to think about when you're kind of choosing supports to go alongside of her. Because she has the triple quick cards, you may want to lean a little bit more towards OG Scotty as opposed to Summer Scotty due to, again, the quick crit that OG Scotty offers. But realistically speaking, you'd be fine with either and you'd still be able to do a ton of damage and pop off. Again, looking at the hit counts here, the 4 hit count on the quick card is definitely nice. It does mean that her quick card will have good performance overall, even though she doesn't have the writing trait or anything like that. Her 3-hit on the arts card is at least going to make sure that it's average, and again with the like 0.8 NP gain rate, it should actually be relatively good. And then the 3-hit count on the Buster is nothing to write home about, but it is what it is with Buster. And then 5 hits on the extra attack is also standard. Now, as we get to her active skills here, the first one is definitely an interesting one. As you can see, there's a whole grocery list of effects. So let's start by breaking it down pretty simply for you guys. So she has a tricolor buff here for herself that's going to increase quick, arts, and Buster performance for 3 turns by 20% for each of them. This is what will level up as you level up the skill. And then she has additional effects that whenever she attacks with each of these 3 cards for the next 3 turns, she will gain a beneficial effect. If it's the quick card, you will gain essentially 10% charge every time you attack. If it's the arts card, you are going to grant a evasion for 1 time, 1 turn whenever you attack. And if it's the Buster card, you are going to get sure hit for 1 turn whenever you attack. So again, the Buster one, I'm going to say probably is the weakest one here. The arts card effect, actually really nice for survivability, and this will help her out in terms of, again, just trying to like stay alive and that anemic HP that she kind of has for a 5-star. So this will be another nice thing. Again, I think the only issue with this is going to be if you're trying to use like OG Scotty and use her NP alongside her, this might invalidate that, but it wouldn't matter because it's the same relative strength as Scotty's NP, which in my opinion should probably be better defensively at this point, but it is what it is. So either way, this is still a nice overall survival mechanic for her to have. And again, the 10% extra NP gauge on quick cards is certainly nice. It is just whenever attacking, so it's non-specified. Again, the other nice thing to denote here is that this will apply to the NP whenever you use it, and it is on a per enemy basis, which means that if you're up against a 3-enemy wave, this will literally just generate, again, 30% charge at that point automatically for Komachi. So it is a really, really nice thing for her to have, and it's something that at least fandom as of the current point in time does not denote. So it's something to really point out to you guys. All of that on a 6-turn cooldown. The second skill here is going to reduce one ally's skill cooldowns by 1 turn. This is definitely an interesting thing to think about, because as you start to think about cooldown reduction for things other than, say, Buster, obviously we have things like the 5th append, but you can see here her first skill's on a 6-turn cooldown, her second skill's on a 7, and her third skill's on a 6. So realistically speaking, cooldown reduction, not a huge deal unless we're in some sort of challenge environment or something where we're going to be going longer than a 3-turn duration. Then yes, maybe we can get back to this even faster and it becomes a good and positive thing. But in the standard, like just, hey, I'm trying to 3-turn farm, no, you can't use this really to double up unless you were to find some other units to really stack this with. And I don't really think that's kind of worth selling out to do just from a damage standpoint, if nothing else. So again, it's a nice thing to have for challenge environment, but realistically speaking, for general purpose use, not going to be that big of a deal. The increase to her own critical star absorption for 1 turn by 5,000% is an interesting one, given the fact that she's a caster, and casters are not normally like so abysmally low with their star absorption that they have issues with this. So again, at the end of the day, 5,000 is maybe a little bit overkill, but this does mean that she'll have a very hefty star absorption weight, and this means that she will practically soak every single star to her cards, assuming that you somehow don't generate enough stars with her noble phantasms. From here, it's also going to be her 50% charge skill, so this is going to be the skill that you're going to want to lower. Again, that means you're going to be getting it to a 7-turn cooldown, but you really just want as much charge as you can get for facilitating 3-turn looping, or maybe even setups in sort of multiple damage dealer types of sets, where she's handling a wave or 2 and somebody else is handling a wave or 2 of their own. So again, it's a really, really nice thing to have, especially in a system as of right now with Quick that doesn't really have too much in the way of party charge. So her really trying to maximize that self-charge is going to be super important. Her third skill here is going to increase her own damage for 3 turns. NP damage for 3 turns. It is 30%. So this is going to be a nice effect just because it is going to scale with, obviously, Oberon and units like him that can amplify NP damage. So it's going to be really, really solid for her. However, interestingly enough, this skill does have 3 other effects, and that is stacking 50% power mods against undead, evil alignment, and shadow servant enemies, each respectively for 3 turns. You might only have one of these in play, you might have none of these in play, or you might somehow, some way have all 3 of these in play. So it could be an interesting thing. They will all stack additively, and interestingly enough, because this is a power modifier on each of these, it actually stacks additively as well with the NP damage, but it will not be doubled up and boosted by Oberon, at least when it comes to the power mod. So another interesting thing there, but just even more modifiers to her potential damage output. Now, as we move on to the passive skills here, you can see she gets item construction D for debuff success rate by 4%, territory creation A to increase her own arts performance by 10%, helping out that singular arts card that she has. And then she has an unnamed passive that appears to be her own unique form of divinity that is going to increase her damage by a flat 225 amount there, and then also grant her instant kill immunity. This is why I said, in a weird way, the death rate being set at 40.5 just doesn't matter, because you're never going to get death procced on her. So it is an interesting thing for her to have. With regards to her append skills, you're probably going to want to go with mana loading first and foremost, as this is going to be one that will help her out just in terms of starting chart and facilitating maybe usages with weird sort of craft essence setups, like maybe a 30% charging CE from an event or something like that, and being able to get kind of back to full under her own power, rather than necessarily having to rely on somebody else to provide it. So again, mana loading is probably what I'd go with first. Her third one here is anti-caster attack damage aptitude. I don't really feel like this one's that synergistic. You can maybe argue there's some synergy here with the anti-undead, evil, or shadow servants, but I think this one's kind of the odd man out as of right now. The extra critical damage, certainly nice. The extra attack performance for her 5-hit, 0.8 NP gain, extra attack, certainly could be a good one as well. And then the 5th append for skill reloading, if you're going to be using her more in a challenge environment and trying to get back to those skills, at least for the first time, this append skill would be decent. So to me, there's no real standout for what the second append choice should be. It's kind of just going to be a choose which one you think would be best for you. But to me, I would go with the mana loading first amongst those. Her Noble Phantasm is a 6-hit AOE Quick NP. As you can see, it's going to deal damage to all enemies. It's going to inflict Curse for 2,000 damage for 5 turns to them after the damage already goes out. It's going to then reduce any healing they receive by 30% for 5 turns. And it's going to inflict a debuff regeneration timer on them that activates at the end of the enemy turn for the next 5 turns. And what this does, this removes the latest buff from them every turn. This is really, really nice for sort of counteracting, maybe certain challenge fights and boss enemies, maybe even story enemies that sit there and kind of just keep buffing themselves. Obviously, this is not going to remove anything that is quote-unquote unremovable, so like a fight-specific gimmick from a break bar, anything that has that white border around it will be considered to be unremovable. But anything else is fair game, and so this could definitely be a really, really nice thing to have. In theory, this would mean that she doesn't need like anything like Sure Hit or Invuln Pierce, but due to the fact that it's at the end of the enemy's turn, you might still want to consider running, some sort of like Invuln Pierce CE should the situation call for it. But otherwise, again, this is really, really nice, and it makes no delineation for what that buff is, so it could be an offensive or a defensive buff, just depending. From there, we'll have a 60% chance to instant kill enemies on top of that, so she kind of just gets everything, so to speak, in her kit. Buff removal, instant kill chance, 50% charge, star soaking, and multiple power modifiers, and just about everything you'd want to see. Again, fandom does have notes about the instant kill rates, but I highly recommend, if you want to understand a little bit more about death procking and instant kill, go check out my video on Instant Death Explained. It's part of the Explain series that I have, kind of detailing several of the game's mechanics, and it'll explain exactly how death procking works. Just understand that this does not mean that 60% of the time you will kill a enemy, because there's a lot of factors that go into this, including the rarity of the enemy and whether or not it is a servant. You are very unlikely to instant kill enemy servants, so this is why instant kill is usually a meme more for the player side of things, even though the enemies actually do have really good instant kill chances against you as the player. Looking at her overcharge effect, you can see it also increases NP damage for 1 turn, activating first by a base of 20%. Scales all the way up to 60%, which is rather hefty, but this is just going to be another nice thing, combined with the third skill having 30% on it. This means she has 50% NP damage up that can be doubled up by Oberon every single time she NPs. So it's definitely a nice thing. It's not multi-turn duration, so you can't keep stacking this, but it's at least going to always be there before each and every NP. So I do think it's a really, really nice thing. Now, talking about Komachi, let's talk about actual craft essence recommendations for her. Black Grail, just going to kind of be the easy standout. In fact, realistically speaking, it's one of the only ones I can recommend, because Komachi's refund is so good, as we'll talk about here in a second, that starting from 0 is really just no problem for her. So to me, Black Grail is really going to be the one that you're going to want to go with. Again, she already has other NP damage sources in her own kit, so stacking even more NP damage and then maybe doubling all of this up with Oberon, really, really a strong and potent combination for her. And then, like we said, you may want to run and ignore invincibility and invuln pierce type CE. She actually has one in her own banner, so this one is relatively nice. It's also all attack scaling. Split stats, so it's not the greatest, but I just figured this was a kind of easy recommendation for her, since it is literally something that you might acquire in the process of actually rolling for Komachi. So again, I think this is a really, really nice synergistic banner in that regard, and of course, the art is fantastic. But those are going to be the craft essence recommendations that I would make for Komachi. As we look at her refund numbers here, the refund numbers kind of are going to work like this. So with double Summer Scotty against 3 assassin enemies, so a 3 enemy wave, and it's kind of her actual niche with her being a caster, you're going to be looking at needing 0 out of 18 overkill hits to reach the 50% breakpoint that Quick normally requires. Yes, you heard that right. She will refund 62.4% with 0 overkill hits with double Summer Scotty against 3 assassins. So this is really, really just good, solid refund numbers for a Quick unit. At even 3 overkill hits, that number jumps up to 65. At 18 out of 18, the maximum potential, she is at 78.6%. So you're still kind of like capped out there in that regard. You're not necessarily going to have, again, the capacity to go higher than this without mixing in a third Scotty or something else like NP gain from Nero Bride or something to be able to get more. So you might be able to get her all the way up to 100%, but you'd have to really sell out and you'd have to get a whole heck of a lot of overkill hits. Not really worth going after. Just kind of take that 50% breakpoint and run with it. And again, remember that her skill 1 here, due to the effect of the quick card up, gives 10% per enemy hit. So this does kind of factor into that refund. Komachi herself is going to be kind of against Berserkers a little bit more hairy, but still not, because still at 0 out of 18 overkill hits against 3 Berserkers with double Summer Scotty, she'll still get to 58%. So it really doesn't matter at this point what she's facing. She will be able to easily probably 3-turn loop. Now, keep in mind, when we start talking about this then, and we know there's a lot of charge potentially flying around in these comps, and she herself has 50% charge, this does open some doors for maybe working in a non-standard node setup. This is really, really good for Komachi. What do I mean by that? So let's take a look at the actual charge scenarios here. So on screen you have, we don't basically even need to denote a 333 assassin node because she'll easily do it. So here's how she'd operate with a 333 berserker node. You can notice really no append on any of these other than the third one, which is actually a 2-2 berserker node. But just looking at the 3-3 berserker node, To start out with, you can basically just say, okay, we're going to go ahead and use both, like all of the Summer Scotty skills on here right there. Turn 1, go ahead, rotate for an Oberon. Crap, you can even get away with using his skill 1. It's actually 120% charge already at that point. It's complete overkill, and it just doesn't matter because she's going to refund 31% and then get 30% just naturally due to that first skill because you're up against 3 enemies. From there, she'll use her own charge skill. That'll be another 50%. That'll be enough for another NP. And then essentially from there, the refund will work the exact same. And then you use the remaining Oberon 50% charge, and boom, there you go. You didn't really even care. The only factor was that there was at least 2 enemies in the wave. Otherwise, this is almost infinitely replicable, given the fact, sorry, I pointed the wrong number there, given the fact that, again, this is going to be a factor of how many enemies you have. At 2 enemies, this will only be 20%, which will be just enough, essentially. And you can kind of see that as it's basically going to work the exact same way with assassins here, but this is now a 2-2 assassin node. You need 3 out of 12 overkill hits for this to work. That's really not hard. Again, 3 out of 12 overkill hits is basically 1 overkill hit per enemy that you're facing. Well, actually, technically not, because it's a 2-2 wave. So at that point, you maybe would need 1 more hit of overkill somewhere, somehow. And that's really just not hard to do in most of these nodes. So at the end of the day, that's a really low bar. And you can see, boom, here you go. Start out the exact same way. No append, no craft essence charge, just both double Summer Scotty charge skills, and then we rotate for OG Scotty, put her in there, do her quick up as well, and that's going to be enough to get 29% refund. Right there, you get the 2 enemy 10% charges. That's 99%. That will round up to 100%, so you can NP again. And then essentially, you're going to be still using her 50% charge there in turn 2 as well. Sorry, I didn't mention that. And then charge going to work the exact same way basically on turn 3. Only now we're going to include the OG Scotty's 50% and probably defense down on wave 3 there. And boom, there you go. That'd be how you do it against a 2-2 assassin node. And even against a 2-2 Berserker node, this is still possible. We just now start out with the append and we use Nero Bride instead. Since Komachi does have 6 hits, since she does have very good refund, again, she's definitely going to be a refund-oriented unit, which means Nero Bride's going to work really well with her. Usually, the less hit counts a unit has in their NP, the less effective Nero Bride is going to be at actually facilitating refund and looping with them. But because Komachi is actually fairly good at this for a quick unit, this is going to be right up Nero Bride's alley. And so you can see, we start out with the append. We use her 30% charge and 45% NP gain, one of the Summer Scotties, and then we're probably just going to kind of rotate Umu there at that point to the other Summer Scotty, do her quick ups. And then boom, there you go. That's going to be enough for 100% charge on turn 1. Turn 2, you're going to basically be having the guaranteeable 2 enemy 10% charges, the 30% refund, essentially, and then one of the other Summer Scotty charge skills to get you to that 100%. Fire off the NP a second time. Then you're going to finally use Komachi's 50% charge on the 3rd wave. And then again, the same exact refund here to complete the 3-turn loop. So really, Komachi is actually a very versatile unit. She's going to be able to refund even over oddly structured nodes, as long as it's not necessarily a single enemy wave. And there still might be a scenario that you could make that work if you're in a scenario where the event that you're in actually has a starting charge C. So there are multiple scenarios I think that she can work in. She's very versatile, even though she's quick, which is not something that necessarily is par for the course. So this does make her a really, really nice unit. Now, with all of that in mind, let's talk Komachi's damage numbers. As you guys can see, her actual damage right here, you're looking at essentially 22k here at NP1 with no power mods in play. But remember, she can have actually all the way up to 3 power mods. I wouldn't really expect 3. I think 1 is going to be more or less your bread and butter, maybe 2 if you get lucky for most things. So again, these are 50% power mod modifiers here. These are definitely, at least going to impact damage, and these are neutral numbers anyway, so against basically nothing that she would actually be effective against, and just her own buffs, so no sort of externals from supports or anything like that. So these are pretty respectable numbers, I'd say, for an AOE caster. Okay, so now as we get into the actual damage scenarios, here you guys can see this is going to be her within her normal environment. So this now is still neutral damage, but it now includes support buffs, mystic codes, craft essences, all of that. You can see we're going to be running her with double Summer Scotty, Oberon, a level 100 Black Grail, and a maxed out Neo plug suit. Boom, here's what your numbers are going to look like at NP1, just raw. Definitely not too bad. And then with a power mod here, up to 300k by wave 3. So certainly not terrible, but definitely something that I think, might not be exactly world beating. Just really, really, really solid, especially for a quick caster, which at this point in time, we know quick doesn't have a whole lot of options. So given the fact she is a Black Grail looper, given the fact she can operate in non-conventional node setups, this is definitely pretty solid for her. So in comparison, we do have other units that we can kind of look towards, and I think she actually does compare fairly favorably, especially as we're looking towards this sort of singular power mod status. So we have Alice that has come out prior to her. Again, Alice is somebody that came out with the Witch on the Holy Night collaboration event, and she's definitely another interesting one, as she's another AOE caster that's quick. And you can see here basically that you also have Forest City and Darkness battlefields, and even then you're kind of looking at very similar numbers, assuming these are in play. If not, the numbers actually dip a little bit more. I think Alice is maybe a little bit more challenge oriented than Komachi is, but Komachi is going to have that little bit of extra sort of oomph there. But again, you can see Alice having not just human but also man, and the potential to scale up to both. So Alice has a little bit more upward mobility, or rather I would say she has the likelihood of that upward mobility happening more often compared to Komachi. Her niches will be, again, you're likely to get maybe one of these three niches, but not necessarily likely to have multiple of them at any given time. So at that point, I'm going to say Komachi may have a little bit of a harder time, but it really just depends. Comparatively, we also have Ace here, aka Tonal Eco. She's going to be coming out this year at Anniversary for NA, and you can see her damage is just pretty stellar. She also has that 5th append now in the game that really helped her out in that regard. This does allow her to operate with double Coin Skya Oberon, a level 100 Black Grail, and just really kind of pop off and double up her damage. And you can see there, even without looking into her evil niche there, basically you're already at 357k. So Ace, kind of known for her damage output, she is still the strongest AOE caster in that regard. And so this is where I think her being able to hit these like 300k numbers in terms of Komachi is actually a really good thing for her. This does mean that she's not completely trounced by Ace, and there may be other reasons to use her, especially as you start getting into the scalability of her power mods, if you can maybe get them. Now, Daiko Kuten was another one that we mentioned. Daiko Kuten will actually, ironically enough, be stronger probably on average if Earth trait is in play, and this is just NP1. So if you're somebody that has rolled for a lot and gotten multiple copies of the rats are actually a really, really solid, scarily good unit for what they are. And like I said, I think it's one of those units that a lot of people just sleep on, but it is what it is. And then as we compare, we also have Summer Wu. She's another summer unit that's going to be coming, and she's definitely someone that's not really known for her damage. She's more of a setup unit for undead and stuff like that. So to me, I don't think her damage necessarily compares as favorably, but I also think she's a little bit more of a 4-star that's maybe a little bit more unique and not necessarily meant to be your 3-turn looper type of deal. And then last but not least, we also throw in a comparison right here to Rasputin, somebody who's currently out on an A. I think if we start to compare to Tiamat, things start getting pretty insane. But this is also just a factor of multiple things. But keep in mind, Rasputin, his numbers here, while they definitely look good, especially against the evil niche, Rasputin is an alter ego, so he only gets that 1.5 times modifier against like say assassins and stuff like that. Whereas Komachi will get a 2 times modifier against assassins for her damage. And that is what I mean when I say that these are neutral numbers. These do not include any sort of class advantage modifier. So the numbers can definitely go up from here, and they can definitely get a whole lot better. But yeah, I do think Komachi is a very good, very solid unit. If you're looking for an AOE Quick Caster and you're maybe not a huge fan of the rats, I think Komachi can absolutely fill that niche for you. She definitely has some really nice challenge applications, I would say, particularly with that first skill. And I do think that she can be a solid damage dealing farming caster on top of that. So to me, I think she's a good all-arounder. She's definitely somebody that you guys should pay attention to, at least in the short term here, and we'll see. Maybe she'll be a unit that you guys will skip, but I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts, whether or not you think you should roll for her, and again, will you roll? I'm obviously somebody that's going to kind of be in the wait and see approach, especially as we see for the third ascension and everything coming out, but there's already some hints out on JP. Please don't mention any spoilers. But again, I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts. Thank you guys for watching, and have a good one.